All right, today is part 6 of Peace of Mind, and I don't know, how many have found this series to be helpful so far? Thank you. Okay, me too. And I've been looking forward to this one especially because I think, without meaning to, sometimes followers of Jesus duck this conversation because it's personal, it's private, it's hard, it's messy. It brings sometimes a sense of guilt, sometimes a sense of regret or shame. But really right now, we know that about at least 50% of guys struggle with sexual addiction in some way, shape, or form. And we know that the ladies, and you're gonna hear it today, it's on the rise. Some 25% would have accessed pornography in the last month. So we know this is a human problem. It's not just your problem or my problem. It's a human, it's a cultural, it's a Christian reality. And we're trying to figure out how do we honor the design of God for our lives in all things, including this gift of sexuality that he has given us for a good purpose. So we're gonna lean into that today. I just wanna say, I can remember being exposed to pornography when I was 10 years old. I was a 5th grader living in Grand Forks Air Force Base, and I'd gone over to a friend's house, and that friend had older brothers, and the older brothers were sitting on the couch with a couple of their friends, parents gone, in the dark watching something on, remember those TVs that were twice as deep as they were wide? Remember those ones? They had one of those TVs, and I sat down, and I'd never really seen, or I don't even know if I'd heard of much at that point in 5th grade, and they're watching a pornographic movie. And I can remember sitting on that couch being kind of confused, kind of excited, kind of awkward, and really hoping that my mom and dad didn't know what I did that day. Hi, Mom and Dad. They're probably gathering here at the 9 a.m. service. That's what I did that day, okay? So for most of us, I mean, the statistics are overwhelming. I think by the time you're 12, some 90% of our sons and daughters have been exposed to pornography. Not my sweet princess. Oh, yes, your sweet princess, okay? So it's kind of reached epidemic levels, and we say, well, how do we navigate this? How do we get healthy? How do we, if we have a real addictive, because it begins to affect the brain chemistry, if it's not just to try harder or pray more, although we do need to try, although we do need to pray, but a lot of it has to do with having a plan and a process that really helps us walk to a place of freedom, a place of hope, a place of kind of having the consistency in our heart that we really want to have. And so today we're going to lean deep and wide, and there's no raising your hands if you identify, okay? But I know that a lot of us will. And you're gonna hear some next steps of some community options that we have. You're also gonna hear a testimony today from a couple in our church, Greg and Jenna, that I just have to say, my mad respect for you today, because they're doing something incredibly courageous to share the reality of parts of their story with us. And they feel like God's given them a mission to continue their own journey, but to help other people start or continue their journey. We're also gonna get to hear from Ashley Jameson. Ashley is a staff member at Pure Desire Ministries. It's one of the 30 different, if you will, missionary units that we support. Ashley is a pastoral sex addiction professional. This has been her world for a number of years now. She has a backstory she's gonna share with you, and now she lives in part on mission with Jesus to help other people find their own story of healing and hope. So would you join me in giving a huge welcome to Ashley Jameson from Pure Desire Ministries, who's with us this morning.
I'm so excited to be here. I'm already emotional. I might cry. I will cry. I always cry. It's a running joke at work. I'm the crier. So let me just cry for a minute. I'm so excited to be here, you guys. I actually grew up here in Suncrest. So my husband, I had him drive me around today with my latte, look at my old house off Meadowview and down Bluebell Court, if you want to know. Like, yeah, we used to run down that back hill and then sneak into the park and swim at nighttime and did all kinds of crazy things I would never let my kids do now. But this was my stomping ground, all the bridle trails and everything. So I'm very, very excited to be here. I'm Ashley. I have 4 children. We are in the midst of all of this. Like Bart said, you cannot avoid this. It's no longer what do we do to protect our kids from seeing it or being exposed to it. It's just what do we do to train them how to respond, and what do we do to train them how to, come to us with it. You cannot avoid it. I work for Pure Desire. I've been on staff for 7 years. We have the parental controls. We have My kids are homeschooled right now. I mean, even the other day, I went to look up something for a private Christian school, and somebody hacked their website, and it was porn. And I'm at this Christian party, sledding party, and there's porn on my phone. And I'm like trying to shut it off. You cannot avoid it. So I'm so glad that you guys are here right now and just taking this seriously. I should have done my vocal warm-ups. It's like I ate a gallon of ice cream this morning. And so I have 19-year-old twin boys, and then I have a 12-year-old daughter and an 11-year-old son. So I see the struggles with the children. I see the struggles at work, and I'm going to share some more stats with you today. But this is what I do all day, every day. We have counseling. I'm the associate director of women's groups at Pure Desire, so I oversee all of the women's groups, meaning that I work with churches and organizations to help them start groups. But I also work with the individual woman who calls me and says, I don't know where to start. And then I get to say, just tell me a little bit about your story, and I will give you a next step. There is always a next step if you're struggling. And so I want you to know that there are some practical next steps for you guys, because you have a church where there's a pastor who's talking about this and opening the door, which is huge. You're already leaps and bounds ahead of so many other churches that are battling to get something like this going. But if you're still feeling a little nervous, a little fearful of stepping out, you can call me. You can call me. My contact information is on the website at Pure Desire, and you can tell me a little bit about your struggle, and I will help you have a next step if you're not ready yet to engage in community. Community is so, so good because there's research that shows when we share our story, when we process our story, and we're trying to make sense of our narrative out loud in a safe environment, it fires up all these different neural networks in our brain, and it brings healing to us that you cannot get by processing by yourself. And so many people, especially in Christian organizations, we want to say, well, isn't that the past, the past? Can't I just get my book and go process it with Jesus? All I need is Jesus. Jesus is so good. But we also have a physical body, and it's spiritual and it's physical. So just the same way if somebody came into Pastor Bart's office and said, I'm addicted to heroin, we would not just say, take this scripture, go pray the armor of God over you, and, hopefully you're better, right? We would detox. We would know that there's physical ramifications for that. We would know that there's probably physical things we need to do to get the body healed and back in shape. And pornography and sexual sin does the same thing to our bodies. There's all kinds of imaging now, amazing things we can do with the brain that show a person who's been looking at pornography's brain next to somebody who's being on cocaine. And it is the same. It has these little divots and holes and areas where it's atrophied. But it also shows that we can be transformed and renewed. And so when you do the work and when you do the healing and when you go through the process, you can take that same brain and it fills back out and it smooths back out the way it's intended to be. And so God can physically renew and heal our bodies along with spiritually. It's a spiritual issue that has physical ramifications as well. And speaking of online, hi to our online people. Community is so important, but I also love online. I have worked for Pure Desire from 7 years from home. Before working from home was cool, I was working from home. Everybody else is now their dogs in the background, just makes it normal for me. And I also run an online group at 6 in the morning because I work from home, I have kids, I pretend to homeschool them. And so I do an online group in the morning before my kids even get out of bed. It's amazing. We have no excuse. There are resources everywhere, whether in your community, online, and they are all very, very good. So anyways, once upon a time, there was a little girl named Ashley, a little black girl in Suncrest, and I grew up in a home where my mom, being, she's about to turn 75, grew up in an area where it was hard to be a black woman in a poor family, and so her idea of love was financial provision. And so she found her identity, and now I'm learning all this. Of course, I didn't know all this as a little girl. I just was like, why don't you love me? But now her identity was in finances and accomplishments and achievements. And so that's what she focused on when I was a little girl. All I knew is we were raised by nannies. My mom was never home. I obviously must not be worth her saying no to that second job that she really didn't need to be home with me. And then on the school side of things, no offense to anybody who might have called me names when I was a kid. I know we all grow up in Heo, but on the school side here in Suncrest, I experienced a lot of racism. And so I had this home where my mom was absent, and then I had this school where I felt very, very rejected. And so I grew up feeling like I need to be a chameleon. I need to just be whoever I can be to fit in and to be loved and accepted. This started a really bad trajectory for me because then I would do anything, be anybody, just to feel love. And so the difference between love and sex addiction is you can be a sex addict, be striving for that chemical high, that dopamine, but you can also be a love addict, searching for love, doing anything sexual in order to get it. And so it looks like you have sexual issues, but really you have an identity crisis, a love issue. You want that love that we're supposed to have, that we do find through Christ, but we look for it in other people because we're meant to be loved. We're meant to be in relationship. And so this started this war within me, and I did go to church as a little girl. I always tagged along to different people, different churches, and I loved God. But growing up in a family that didn't go to church and not having really any church friends at school, I didn't know what it looked like to be somebody that loves God and struggles at the same time. At our church, we would often have testimony night, and so it would be before Christ and after Christ. And there is a lot of transformation that happens before Christ and after Christ. But I thought that's what it looked like. You had struggles before Christ, you found Jesus, no struggles. And so me being a Christian girl and struggling sexually, I thought nobody can know what I'm going through because I'm a Christian and I struggle, and all these Christians don't struggle, right? None of them struggle. That's what I thought, for real. And so around 15, 16, I ended up transferring into Spokane and going to Shadle. And that was a blessing because I met this whole group of friends. They were all about young life. They were all about church. And I was like, I'm going to rededicate my life to God. This is amazing. This is where I'm supposed to be. And so I was an Unwanted teacher. I, led worship. I did the Bible camps out there at like Ford or Springdale. I don't know if they still do them out there. Camp counselor out there. I knew that was my calling. I loved Jesus and I wanted people to love him the same way I did. But I had this deep, dark secret. And so after about a year of doing this and just knowing this was my place, I was in a youth group, youth night, and the youth pastor, whom I loved dearly, he kind of took me into his family and showed me a lot, was giving a sermon on sexuality. And all I heard was pure, unpure. Wait till you're married. Don't lose your virginity. Purity ring. His daughter had a purity ring. My dad, I didn't even barely see him, so I had no purity ring. And I even remember hearing, and maybe you guys remember some of these talks, you're like two pieces of paper, and when you have sex with somebody, it's like you're glued together, and then when you break up, you're all torn apart because you connect and you bond and you physically attach to people. And I'm like, I'm a shredded piece of paper, like I have nothing to offer a Christian person. And so right then, my standard for myself of what kind of guy I would get just kept dropping lower and lower in my mind. And those messages were so harmful. And I know that the intention was good because being a mom, I want the best for my kids. I want them to wait till they're married to have sex. I want them to be sexually pure. But we need to also teach people how to navigate the gray, teach people how to be Christians in a messy world, because show me the characters in the Bible that didn't make mistakes, other than Jesus. And so I wasn't getting that message. And another one was, your purity is like a cup of flour, and if you have sex, it's like you dropped it on the ground. And you can scoop it back in, but it all won't go back in, and it will be dirty and full of debris. And I'm like, okay, so now I'm a torn up piece of paper and a dirty cup of flour. And so I'm hearing these messages from my pastor, and I went right back into the world after that. So a year of this girl who had passion to be back in with Jesus, who loved her friends, but would hear things from her friends like, talking about other girls that had had sex. And I'm like, I can never let them know my struggles. They will reject me. And And so I went back out in the world because the world was safer for me. If at least the world knew who I was, at least I wasn't hiding. I wasn't waiting for somebody to pull back the curtain and be totally embarrassed in front of all my friends and feel like a fraud and a monster for teaching these kids at Awana, and I shouldn't have been up there because I'm not like all the other people. And so that was the message I kept hearing. I'm not like all the other people. I ended up getting pregnant my senior year in high school. That's why I have twins, and they're 19. Yeah, do the math, I'm 38. I ended up getting pregnant my senior year in high school and having twins. And I was like, I will not let my kids be raised without Christ. Those children are what brought me back into church. I found a big church, Life Center, back when it was, off of Indiana. And I sat in the very, very back with my babies. And I stopped cussing when I was 5 months pregnant because I read that they could hear me. And so I brought them to church, and I stopped cussing, and I sat in the back of the church, and I was like giving them Jesus. And so then I brought them to church. I ended up marrying their dad because that's what I thought you were supposed to do, even though it was a very, very toxic, unhealthy relationship, extremely toxic. And then I ended up getting divorced. So now here I am, this 21-year-old who's been struggling with all these different things, and now I've got these babies, and now I'm divorced, and Life Center didn't accept my registration to work in the nursery, and I know it's because they saw that I checked I was unmarried, and so I have all these shame messages from the church. But I still was trying. I was still going to church, and I would be on the wagon, and I would have never considered myself an addict because I would do so good with my little babies in church, and I was a women's pastor or women's leader again and on the worship team again. But then about every year, I'd fall completely off the wagon, and I would find myself in a bar, or I'd find myself at a guy's house, or I'd find myself somewhere that I shouldn't have been. And so I would get back on the wagon, and then I'd do the same thing for a whole year, try to force myself to not be that. But I wasn't doing any inner work. It was all just behaviors. I was just jumping from one thing to the other. And then I developed a sweet eating disorder and OCD. I would lock my door about 30 times. Unlock, lock, unlock, lock, unlock, lock. I'd put my card, every time I leave the checkout, out of my wallet, in my wallet, zip it, put it back. Out of my wallet, in my wallet, zip it, put it back. And I'd have to do that about 5 to 10 times. Later, again, when I got healthy, I realized my brain was grasping for control because I was divorced, I was a single mom, I was in school, I was working 3 jobs while I was in school, while I had twins, just trying to hold everything together. And my brain didn't like it. And so this is 3 or 4 years into this single parenting, swinging my pendulum back and forth of over-serving, over trying to be Christ-like, trying to make myself be what I wanted to be in Jesus, and then falling off the wagon. Fell off the wagon again, met my current husband in the bar. God was like, this girl needs a rescue. And so we ended up realizing, hey, we both do this. We both have this colorful past, and we both want to do what's right. We both want Jesus. So he felt safe to me because now I met this other Christian who understands me. I think it might have been the first time I really felt like that. I had my non-Christian friends, my Christian friends, the friends that knew this part of me, the friends that knew this part of me. And so we got married 7 months later. It was a brilliant idea. And then 4 years into our marriage, I thought, this is perfect. He doesn't cuss at me. We love each other. We have so much fun together. We both love God, but we both understand our past. And then in my marriage, I found out John had a past with prostitutes. And that really rocked my world. See, Ashley, you're never going to get the life you wanted. You're never going to get the Christian husband you wanted. The boogeyman's going to start coming out of the closet. What did I do? Now I've dragged my twins into the second relationship that's harmful. And now we have 2 more kids. And then a few years down the road, I found out he was struggling with pornography, still, currently in our marriage. And it just about destroyed me. I felt like God just plucked the trauma from my marriage and came all the traumas I hadn't dealt with in my life and all the issues I kept just trying to plug like a whack-a-mole game. And I broke. I was crying. I I stopped drinking wine. I canceled social media. I read my entire Bible front to back. I went to the elders in the church and I said, somebody please help me. I don't know why I'm feeling like this. And I got, are you sure you're trusting God enough? Are you sure you're forgiving your husband? And so then I started to feel like a bad Christian. Like there's something I'm doing to not recover from this trauma that I'm feeling. And then, I just kept praying, God, bring me somebody that can help me. And we ended up moving to Coeur d'Alene and going to church. The next Sunday, I was like, we're not taking a break from church. We're going to church. We went to church for the one across the street, and I don't know if many of you guys know Rodney. I know he's been to this church several times. Rodney was on stage. He said, we're starting something brand new. It's the Conquer series, and it was part of this Pure Desire thing. And I was like, this is perfect. You're going to go. And so I strongly support kicking people into where they need to go. I mean, eventually they do need to do it for themselves, but it's okay, to say you need to do this for our marriage. And so fast forward, like it's 8-9 years later, here I am working for Pure Desire, which I never would have thought. And it's the greatest thing I can do to say, you can change and you are not alone. Going into this betrayal recovery that I went into because of John, I started looking at his material, addict material, and I'm like, why does this apply to me? I'm the victim. And I started realizing I have problems too, and from my past. And so then I went simultaneously healing my betrayal, all my betrayals, and also all the self-inflicted wounds I had given myself because of my love, sex, and relationship issues. And it has changed our family. The twins were 10 when we started it, and it has radically changed our family. I would say downward to our kids, sideways to our friends and siblings, and even upward to my mom, saying, well, why are you so healthy now? And I'm like, well, actually, I'm doing this program, and you should do it too. And she did, and so it just changed our family, and it broke those generational curses. As I started healing, I realized that my mom had so much of the same trauma I did, including being raped. I was raped at 15 years old as a virgin, and when I told my mom that, she said she was raped as a virgin in the military by her lieutenant who threatened to leave her in KKK territory. And I just realized, how do these generational things pass down even when they're unspoken? There's something in the nuances of what we do when we don't have that solid identity and we don't know our full narrative and we don't heal that brokenness. And so it's not too late, ever, 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 ever. It's not too late, and you're not the only one. So I wanted to share a couple stats with you. I'm just one story. Jenna and Greg are going to be another story for you guys. But it's overwhelming how many people struggle in some area. And I'm talking from fantasy to reading too many romance novels to masturbating, porn, prostitutes, affair, all the way to the other side of I don't want to ever have sex. I don't ever want to be in a relationship. I don't enjoy sex. I've been married for 65 years and I've never had an orgasm. All of that is an intimacy disorder. All of that is on this pendulum of sexual health that can swing from one end to the other, and we need to talk about it as a church because it's a sacred, sacred gift that God has given us, and it's something that the enemy wants to destroy. And we do Financial Peace University, and we do mission schools. I don't know what you call it. I didn't grow up super religious. But we don't talk about sexuality, and it's so important. It has to be part of our normal language. Normal language. My kids hear me talk about it all the time, and it does help them feel safer to have that culture where they know it's not a one-time talk from mom and dad. It's a culture where we can talk about human struggles. Because Adam and Eve had the best parent, the best neighborhood, the best school, the best teacher, and they still sinned. And so we can take the pressure off of ourselves as parents and Christians that we have to be this perfect image for our kids or for our community. And so I would just encourage you to, even if this doesn't impact you, to be thinking how you can be a person of Christ that learns and equips yourself, because I guarantee somewhere along your journey, you're gonna bump up against this issue, whether you're meeting somebody who's been hurt by somebody else's story or somebody who's struggling. And so how we respond to people can be very healing for that person. Okay, I'm used to having a clicker, so I feel very like out of control. So some of our stats here, oh, there I am. 68% of Christian men struggle with unwanted sexual behavior. That's Christians. And I know that when I started finding this stuff out, I felt like I had a sixth sense. Not the kind where you see dead people, but the kind where you see everybody as unsafe. I thought every single person struggles. I can't believe I live in this world. God really had to show me that he is the one that is sinless, and that's it, period, end of story. And so it taught me a new way to rely on God and see myself and also love people in their brokenness. Okay, next slide. 25 to 30% of Christian women struggle with sexual dependency issues. And I would say I have spoken to thousands of people, and I work every single day with churches and men and women, and I know that stat's higher. So these are a little old. But not just sexual dependency issues. Like I said, it could be fantasy interrupting your day, or it could be all kinds of things, or it could be, like I said, on the other end, anorexia, intimacy avoidance. Okay, next slide. And then 57% of pastors have a current or past struggle with pornography. So that's our leadership team. So if we feel afraid to step out and say I'm struggling, how much more so for a pastor who's like, if I share, everybody's gonna lose faith, or if I share, I'm gonna lose my position. And so we even have programs to help pastors at our church, or at our organization. I'm gonna use my slides, because this will probably work better. Okay, and then 91% of men have accessed pornography in the last 30 days, and 60% of women in the last 30 days. That's a big deal. But don't be scared by this. This is just information we need to talk about, and not to create fear in anybody, but the problem's here. And so not talking about it is not doing anything to help us. It's already here. We're just bringing it out to the light so we can work with it and start changing it. 56% of divorces involve the internet use of a partner as a driving factor. Pornography addicts are 300% more likely to cheat on their partner. Evidence shows women are the fastest growing demographic of porn users. 1 in 3 porn users are women now. And this is confusing our culture. I have a lot of women that come. I lead betrayal and beyond groups for spouses of the addicts, but I also lead Unraveled, managing love, sex, and relationships for the women who struggle. And I will have women come in that are confused. Well, I watched porn and I was attracted to the females, so I think I'm same-sex attracted. And the body is beautiful and arousing, but pornography is confusing us. It's making us feel like we need to be like that, look like that, act like that, come into marriage porn ready, rather than entering into a marriage covenant saying, this is the start of us figuring things out. We don't come in knowing what to do. This idea of this is what our honeymoon should look like because we watched Twilight, or, we come in and we start the journey here and it's awkward and we're gonna figure it out, and that's the fun part, that we get to do this together. And only 7% of pastors report that their church has a ministry program for those even struggling with porn. So you guys are one of the rich ones. You guys are one of the lucky ones. You guys have next steps. And even so, within those 7% of churches that have things going, a lot of times they're not for women. And so women are struggling too. Women need help too. And unfortunately, one of the fastest growing searches for porn is rape porn. It's making our culture very, very violent and very unhealthy. And so with kids, having teens, I've run these sexual health groups for them and their friends. If you give kids pizza and soda and crackers and cookies, they will bring their friends. And I found that my kids are more receptive to me talking to them if I let them have their friends. If I just sit my twins down and try to have a conversation, they're like, we're not doing this. If I invite their friends because their friends think I'm cool, then the kids kind of just listen and their friends talk to me. So figure out ways to get your kids to open up and talk to you. And I have ideas on resources too for teenagers. Fight the New Drug. It's not a Christian resource, but it will show what porn does to their brain. Because some kids and even adults think porn's not a big deal. It's not hurting anybody. But it is changing your brain. It's changing the way that you physically react. We have more teenage boys now graduating high school with erectile dysfunction. That's not okay. Like, that is not normal. It's changing our bodies. It's changing everything. Okay, so you guys, like I said, you're one of the lucky churches because you have people going first in your church. This was John and I in our church, but I have the privilege of going to dinner last night with Greg and Jenna and hearing their story, and it just made me very emotional. It really reminded me of John and I. And you guys are so lucky. You don't have to be the first ones to get up here and share. It is powerful to share your testimony. We see that all through Scripture. Testimonies and stories are so powerful. And so I feel super honored to get to invite them and get to introduce them to come up and share their story with you guys.
Is this on? All right, cool. We're still trying to figure these out. Thanks, Ashley. And thank you guys for being here this morning and for welcoming us. We're a little nervous. This is the first time we've ever done this, but one of the things that we thought was really unique about this church, we've been here for about 2 years. One of the first sermons I saw when we scoped it out, I'm a lifer Christian. I grew up, and I only ever went to one church, and then came here. But we searched on the website for sermons, and the first sermon I saw was from Pure Desire, and I thought, hey, like, something's going on here, right? So we thought that was pretty cool. So that's how we ended up here. I started my experience, I guess, with pornography and masturbation when I was 13 years old. So I remember it was in my 7th grade math class. I won't mention the teacher's name. I didn't go to Lakeside, so you wouldn't know him anyway. But a couple of my buddies are looking at something, and I'm like, hey, what's going on there? It was like, man, my brain lit up like a Christmas tree. I mean, I had no idea what was going on, but it was exciting. And to be honest with you, at that time, I mean, I was a kid. I didn't know what I was looking at. I didn't know what I was doing, but I knew that I liked that. I also knew I was a lifer Christian, right? I grew up in church. So red flags, like something's wrong with this. I know this is wrong, but at the same time, it's like, it doesn't, I mean, it's pretty good, right? So this began this just real struggle. And it started like, you know, at first like, okay, I can beat this, you know, I'm a faithful Christian, and it didn't work. You know, I tried for years throughout middle school and then into high school, just trying to figure out how I can white knuckle it through this, right? I can fix this, and it didn't work. It compounded a lot of shame in my life. I knew on the one hand what I wanted to, who I wanted to be, and who I believed God wanted and needed for me to be, and then there was who I really was, right? And I did not know how to reconcile those two people. I was kind of similar to Ashley, so I'm up on the stage on the worship team. I'm playing guitar and leading worship and leading small groups and trying to find everything I can do to make myself feel like, you know what, this is still happening, but I can overcome that with these other things. Well, that didn't work either, right? And so in my senior year of high school, I went to a church camp I'd been to a lot, and I'd known Jenna for a long time, but we started talking for the first time, and it was like light bulb, right? Like, this girl's into me. And so if I can get this girl, she was a preacher's kid, so I'm like, if I can get this girl to like marry me, like maybe that'll be it, right? I mean, clearly this is a sex problem, right? So I get married. I knew if I get married, I can have sex. That's gonna fix it. Well, so we got engaged right away, and well, not right away, it was about a year. We started dating right away. Got engaged a year later, and as it turns out, that didn't fix it either, right? And so I'm beating my head against it. At this point, I kind of lost hope. We'd been married about a year, got pregnant. We had a baby boy who was just amazing, and I'm looking at this kid and thinking, how am I ever gonna help him? Right? I can't even help myself, and I don't know what to do. I had gone to some friends over the years, and well-meaning people trying to help, some of them peers, you know, and they're going through the same thing, and they're like, oh man, what are you doing? Like, I don't know, we don't know what to do. I got a lot of the same things, well-meaning people saying, hey, you gotta figure this out, man. Just dig into the Word, like God loves you, He can redeem this. And like, I understood religion and relationship, I guess, but I didn't understand addiction. I didn't know what was going on in my brain, what these patterns that had developed, why I couldn't seem to break free. So what I did know is I couldn't live like this. And so on our 2-year wedding anniversary, on the day, I decided to just confess to my wife everything that had been going on.
Yeah, so 2 years in, he comes home from work, and I had made steak for dinner, and it was terrible, obviously. I didn't know how to cook. And he says to me, he looks at me, and he says, "I need to talk to you." And little did I know then that I would hear those words with that same look in his eyes several times. And he confessed his addiction, and although we didn't call it then because we didn't know that really it was an addiction. And I remember him telling me this, and I was a preacher's kid, had no idea. Like, I didn't know what sex was really until I was 17. Like, had no idea going into our marriage. And so he told me all these things, and I remember just running to the bathroom and threw up because it was devastating. Like, I had, like, obviously this was my fault. Like, obviously, if I was prettier, if I was more worthy, like, this wouldn't be an issue because he was looking for something better than me. And so that just began a cycle for us of, like, we would talk about it, and then I would be mad for several days, and then I would forgive him, and we would be fine for a while, and then we would just kind of grow quiet again, and then I would usually find something because I was digging, I was looking for things because I was suspicious, and I would confront him, and he would lie, and then he would tell the truth later, and then I'd be mad again, and we went round and round in this cycle for 8 years, over 8 years. All while I had 4 kids, I felt like my body was wrecked from having kids, and I was the problem. Because if I could just be better, then this wouldn't be our story. And there was so much shame that we didn't want to tell people, like, we didn't want to put our, story out there, because then, like, what would we be labeled, Like, we'd just be labeled the people that can't get it together, And we had shared with some people, but it was, it was very much like, I don't know, like, we don't got anything for you, I'm so sorry. And so in October of 2021, we had another relapse, and I was done. I couldn't take it anymore. My heart was too hurt. It was too broken. And so I told Greg, I said, "You need to get help, or we'll just live in a loveless marriage, because I won't leave you, but I have to remove my heart from yours because I can't be broken anymore. There's no more left of me to break." And for the first time ever, that was me setting a boundary that I didn't know that I needed to set because I needed healing. I didn't know it then, but I was done.
Yeah, and so that was a new one because to that point, she had been pretty quick to forgive, and then it was like, oh, yeah, this is different. And to be clear, I didn't feel great about all this time, right? I knew that the hurt that I was causing. I knew the pain that she felt, which, man, the shame, the pile of shame, it just gets worse. And when I felt shame, it was just like I was alone, right? I couldn't tell anybody. I certainly couldn't tell her. And then, of course, at some point I had to because, or, I was either normally just caught red-handed. So I knew a good longtime friend of mine, Joel, had been through a program called Pure Desire. He talked to me about it because he kind of knew what was going on. And I had told him, man, I don't need that. Like, I'll figure this out, But he was faithful, and I knew that there was something different about Joel. He had been through an ordeal in his marriage, and so I called him the next day, and I was like, dude, I need help. I don't know what I need, but I need help. And he was like on it, Like, let's do this, man. So we started the 7 Pillars curriculum with Pure Desire, which is a 10-month commitment. And he told me right up front, like, you got to be ready for this. And not only is this going to take a lot of time from you, but it's going to turn over every rock, like every dark place in what do they call the basement of your heart? Like, we're going there. And at that point, it was like, there's nothing, I got nothing left. And we did go there. The curriculum is very in-depth. And I thought, for sure, like, this is going to ruin me. I'm going to have to say things. I'm going to have to come to grips with things in my own heart that my wife will hate me. She'll surely leave me. And the exact opposite thing happened. I realized for the first time ever that, this wasn't just an effort issue. I couldn't white-knuckle my way through anything. And I wasn't getting anywhere. But God still did love me. And he wanted to redeem this in me. I realized that I was an addict, right? There's something else going on in here, and the reason I can't seem to break free of this is because I need help, and I need to change, I need to retrain, I need to understand what's going on so that I can change it. Pure Desire says that these are a lot of sexual behaviors. Unwanted sexual behaviors are an illegitimate way of meeting a legitimate need. And that stood out to me because I realized, like, that 13-year-old kid where this all started, he was a good kid. And I'm still a good person. It doesn't make me a bad man, but I still needed help, and I had to have a plan. So we started working through that. We just finished it. Actually, it took us 12 or 13 months to get through a 10-month program, but it has completely changed my life. For me, this was the bottom of the pit. This was the one thing that no matter what, and I felt this all my life, that no matter what I did, there was still this. It wouldn't matter if I could have been Nelson Mandela, man. It wouldn't matter because I still had this thing going on. And nobody knew. And as long as that was still there, it negated the worth in everything else I did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so about 4 months into recovery, or him going through this program, we were on vacation and we had a trigger. And of course, we got into a fight, and all of my feelings came flooding back. And after several hours of silence, because that's how I do conflict, we sat down to have a conversation, and we had the most beautiful conversation. And for the first time ever, I felt like Greg had empathy for me in my pain, and he saw me. And it wasn't just about protecting himself anymore. Like, he understood what I was going through and could feel the pain that I have been through for the last 10 years. And we were so busy protecting ourselves in our own shame and our own fears that we just couldn't see eye to eye, couldn't see what it was like to be each other. And that was a really powerful turning point in recovery for us. So the last 18 months have been super messy and just like really tough. And it's also been really beautiful. I was listening to a song on the way home from work the other day, and I've heard this song 100 times, but it's known, and I just, it stood out to me, the fully known and fully loved, and you have to be fully known to be able to know that you can be fully loved, and there is no part of you that should be hidden. And it's so easy to say, well, God knows me, he knows my heart, but until we step out of those shadows and share with trusted people, we can't really be brought out into the light. And we're a mess still, but we're really, like, I see something in my husband that I have never seen before. He looks at me the way that all the girls dream that their husband will look at them, and it's not that way all the time, but it's still there, you know? It's like where that was not there before, and like there was just so much pain and shame before. So we're just really passionate about lowering the bar of shame and sharing our story and saying, you're not alone, because we feel alone when we don't step into transparency and honesty. And that is where Satan wants us, is alone.
Yeah. It's on your small group sheet. In the spring small group offerings, we're going to be starting the first session of Sexual Integrity 101, which is an 8-week video course that Pure Desire offers. It's a video-led course, so it is co-ed, which might be a little uncomfortable for some of you. The small group discussions will be separate. I really would encourage you to consider this. We're really hoping to run this more than once, so if you can't get to the first one, maybe you can get to the next one. And even if either you're not ready to address this in your life, or it's not a current issue that you're personally struggling with, does anybody in here have a phone? Because, I mean, that pretty much qualifies you for coming to group, to SI 101. We all need to learn how to address the area of sexuality with a spirit of integrity, and that is what Sexual Integrity 101 is about. I'd encourage you to check it out. And thanks again for hearing our story. If you guys, Ashley said, you can always reach out to her. You can always reach out to me or Jenna personally if there's something. I did this for a long time where I just felt like I'm not telling anybody. And if that's you, I get it. At least tell me, right? I'm not going to tell nobody. And someday you're going to have to. Today may not be that day, but you got to get moving. So thank you. We love you guys.
Yeah, so good. So, if it's something you've been struggling with for a long time, if it's something that you said you'd never go back to, yet you found yourself going back to it, if it's something that's harming you or the people in your life, others, then it's a struggle. We would consider that maybe an addiction. I'm not going to diagnose anybody. But those are things that you want to ask yourself and then step out. And like Greg and Jenna said, just come. It's not a big commitment. You're not going to be doing all this homework. Come watch the video series and learn. Learn for other people. Learn if you're a youth leader. Learn if this is something from the past, because I know for sure my sexual struggles when I got married turned into eating struggles and control struggles. And so sexual struggles are just a symptom. And so come and just learn, whether it's past, present, you're just here to help others. I am so proud of them, because when I went to Rodney's office, I was super unhealthy and naggy to him, but bless his heart, it's Rodney. He was our neighbor, and he put up with me. I went to his office. I looked him up on the internet, on the website, because we were brand new at that church, like I said, and I was like, I need to set an appointment with this pastor. And I brought the Betrayal and Beyond material, and I said, I need a woman in this great big church, like thousands of people, to lead this group for me, okay? And he said, there's nobody. I've actually been praying for somebody, and it's going to be you. And I was like, okay, all right. The counselors told him he was crazy, but if you've met Rodney, he is a little bit crazy. And they were like, you can't throw this baby puppy out to the wolves. You're going to throw her in the den with betrayed spouses? You cannot. She's unqualified. She's unequipped. I was severely unqualified and unequipped. But God is amazing. And when we step out, I tell you, there was nobody in that church. I kept rapping at all the doors, trying to figure out if there were other women like me. But I'm not going to walk around with a sign. I mean, eventually I did. It was called a small group launch. And I'm like, I'm here for all the betrayed spouses. And so I want to show you this pyramid of what happens when one couple decides to step out. One couple. This is John and I at the top. He started that Conquer series, like I said. Went into 7 pillars. I launched my first Betrayal and Beyond group. It was a mess and a disaster, and I was always crying, and people quit my group. But then I figured it out, because I got some training, and started another group. And then from John's 7 pillars group, they launched 4 more Conquer series groups, because there was so much interested. So once somebody just was brave enough to step out, the floodgates opened. Don't be afraid of the flood. I will help you manage the flood. That's what I do. And then guys from other churches came to 7 pillars because it was safe to go to another church. And then they would bring it to their new church, I brought the sexual addiction material for women down to the Union Gospel Mission for the women that were in their 18-month program. Then the youth pastor asked me to come speak because so many girls and boys were struggling. And so I went and spoke at the youth, and 40 kids, 40 girls only, came up to me and said they needed the youth group, the curriculum for our youth. This is all within, and then my husband started Top Gun, that's for guys, for young teenagers. This is all within 3 years, and each one of these bubbles probably represents 5 to 7 people, all impacted, 5 to 7 families, 5 to 7 communities, all this, people who then get to change lives and change the ripple effect in their family. We no longer have to keep it under the rug. We can talk about it. So I just encourage you to take a next step. So I already gave you those questions to ask yourself. Has it been a struggle for a while? Is it something that you said you wouldn't go back to, yet you found yourself at again? Is it something that's hurting you or others? The other question I would ask is, do you have one place in your heart, in your story, that you say you're taking to your grave? And that's a scary question to ask people. But like Greg said, tell somebody. Telling one safe person is going to break that cycle of shame. And so it may be your first step, your only step may be just sharing with a safe person. You may join Greg and Jenna's Sexual Integrity 101. Just come for information. That series was a series that we created because we would travel around all over the country and do a 2-day conference, and people would say, I wish I knew this wasn't just for guys who look at porn. I wish my whole church would have been here. I wish I would have brought my teenagers. I wish I would have brought so-and-so. And so we put it on a DVD so you can bring all those people and everybody can see it. Go to the Sexual Integrity. You don't have to sign up, sign in blood, and you don't have to do a 10-month commitment. That's just a video series. And then the last thing would be maybe seek counseling. Or like I said, go to our website and join an online group if you're not ready to engage in your own community yet. But take a next step. Take a next step if you need a next step, or if it's just on your heart to help in this area, then take that step. So thank you for having me. Thank you for letting me share about sexuality and hearing Jenna and Greg's story. And I just encourage you, and we're here to help you guys. My water.
Well, I don't know about you, but I love being a part of this church. If this was your first Sunday, you came to a whopper. Can we give appreciation to Greg and Jenna and Ashley and John for sharing their stories? Thank you so much. Would you stand with me to your feet? So next steps, what's the application today? Well, if this part of your world, been part of your past, been part of your present, who is that safe person? Because it needs to be a safe person. But who is that safe person? You can begin a conversation. If you're at a place that you want to explore more information, I've been through the Sexual Integrity 101. I watched a majority of their courses. They're excellent, just for an explanatory experience. This isn't the 10-month journey yet. This is just, let's wade in a little bit and see where this journey begins to maybe take us. Or number 3, maybe it's time just to seek professional counseling. There are men and women, followers of Jesus, that they love and are committed to helping people with just sexual addiction. And it's what they do. And we'll have a resource list for you shortly. Last thing I'll say is this. One of my favorite verses in the Bible comes out of 1 Timothy on this theme. And it's the Apostle Paul. How many think Paul's kind of a hero in the vernacular and the understanding of Christians? I mean, hero, anybody with me on that one? I want to be like Paul when I grow up. Paul says to Timothy, he says, even though I once was a blasphemer, persecutor, and violent man, the grace of God was poured out on me in abundance. I'm just glad that we can once was, we can once been, we can presently be, but it doesn't have to determine what our future can be. So we're trying to take a courageous step as a church, lower the bar of shame, step right into the middle of the mess, and let's find hope together, because God has hope on the horizon for all of us. Would you join me in prayer? Father, I thank you. I think this is it's one of the better services I think I've been a part of, and I didn't even get to preach. But I thank you, Lord. I thank you. This is real life, and it's probably easier than ever to get mixed up and messed up in patterns and that lead to behaviors and that mess with our value system, maybe than ever before. But I can't say that because like 2/3 of the New Testament letters all talk about sexual immorality and challenges. So maybe it's not. It's part of the beautiful design of God. You made us sexual beings. Like you gave this incredible gift of intimacy, of relationship, but you just have a context for it. And ever since sin has broken into our human hearts, we've had a way of finding the gray areas and the dark areas and distorting your good intentions. So Lord, we want to redeem where we have gone astray. And I pray that you'd help us in the future to really be a church that's offering hope, help, grace, truth, love to all of us. Just help us to get better at that, Lord. To not stay where we're at, to be very intentional, to be seeking you and seeking people and resources that will help us take next steps to be and become who you want us to be and become. So, Lord, thank you. Thank you for your grace. Thank you for your encouragement. And now, Lord, finally, would you just speak to human hearts about what their next step is? I know that the enemy of our souls would love to have us be inspired in this moment, but take no action tomorrow. And so I pray that, God, you give us the courage to do what you speak for us to do. Help us to do that and help us to be a church that's constantly seeking to spur one another on to the better life that you have for us. So thank you for that grace. We thank you for your presence. In Jesus' good name we pray. Everyone said? Amen. Amen.